Negotiations on the US-brokered peace plan between Ukraine and Russia are ramping up, with American officials preparing for more talks in Moscow next week. The European Union's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, says Russia is not ready for a peace deal despite ongoing negotiations with Trump. She says they need to put more pressure on the Russians.
An immediate and unconditional ceasefire must be the first step to ending the war. But right now we see zero indication that Russia is ready for a ceasefire. Russia is not winding down its military machine, but ramping it up. We still need to get from a situation where Russia pretends to negotiate to a situation where they need to negotiate.
So the Ukrainians say they could accept much of the framework, but the sticking points are the same old ones. Security guarantee, backstop, what does that look like for Ukraine? Then there's the land, a whole bunch of other stuff. Daniel Fried is a former US ambassador to Poland and is now at the Atlantic Council and joins us live this morning. Mr. Ambassador, nice to have you on the program. Welcome.
Morning.
What do you make of these developments that Ukraine's open to the framework? I mean, has anything really happened or changed here?
Well, what's happened is the Trump administration is pushing hard for a deal. They're doing so in a clumsy fashion, but they're right to push. I wish they were doing so better, but they're right to push. The Russians are playing their usual games, trying to game the process while giving absolutely nothing in terms of substance. Kaja Kallas is right. The two issues are what's the ceasefire line and what's security for Ukraine after the ceasefire. On both of those issues, the Russians aren't giving. The Trump administration is going to have to put pressure on the Russians. We have options to do so. And if and when we decide to do that, then there is a chance for negotiations. But the Russians will put that off as long as possible through a series of fake positive gestures, obduracy, threats, the usual twisting and maneuvering they go through. The sooner the Trump administration figures that out, the better for all of us.
Taking them a while, though, isn't it? What sort of pressure are you talking about? You mean more sanctions?
Well, the Trump administration, to its credit, imposed sanctions on the two biggest Russian oil companies. These need to be enforced. We have a number of options to do so. A second thing we could do is work with Europe to provide an assured funding stream for weapons for Ukraine and stop restricting the weapons. Send them what they need. A third thing we could do is to put other kinds of pressure on Russia. The U.S. could be backing up the European-led coalition of the willing, so-called, which is considering options to actually help Ukraine with military forces. We should not be begging the Russians for their permission to help Ukraine. We should be telling the Russians that if they don't settle the war, they're going to suffer worse and worse consequences. That kind of language doesn't cripple negotiations, it enables them.
Ambassador, there's always been this lingering question about why the Trump administration doesn't go harder on Russia, doesn't, as you say, actually enact the sanctions that they announce. What is your theory on that? There's been talk, this was a couple of years ago, that the Trump administration doesn't want a war with everyone. It doesn't want to be fighting. It cannot, fight fires on all fronts. With, China's the real enemy. Let's not piss Russia off too much, basically. What do you think's going on there?
The Trump administration is a collection of mutually antagonistic schools of thought. There are some neo-Reaganites who believe in the free world, and they generally believe in supporting Ukraine. There is the Asia First group that thinks that China is the principal adversary, and everything we do in Europe detracts from what we need to do in the Western Pacific. That's foolish because these aren't separate or separable issues. There's a third group which is kind of Fortress North America. They believe we ought to act with toughness against countries like Venezuela. They make noise about seizing Greenland. It's an old Fortress America group. Then there's a group which really it's the right-wing version of the old left-wing come home America, the people who want nothing to do with the world, neo-isolationists. And these groups are all squabbling with each other. You can feel it in Washington. And you see the influence of the different groups in the meandering and contradictory impulses of the Trump administration toward Ukraine. What the president's views are, I can't say, but I suspect he wants, above all else, to win. And he could. He could succeed in forcing a peace in Ukraine to his enormous credit. Real vindication for the president. But to do that, he will have to impose discipline on his own administration and stare down Vladimir Putin. He could do that. I don't know whether he will, but this is possible. This is a solvable problem.
Appreciate your time this morning, Ambassador. Thanks for being with me. Daniel Freed, the former US ambassador to Poland, now with the Atlantic Council.